84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, more than 4 months after she disappeared from her Tucson home. Volunteers in Mexico say they received a tip about where her remains could be. 12 News reporter Maria Stobbs is here with the latest. Maria?
Mark, that's right. This search group regularly looks for missing people, and they've helped find the remains of dozens of people in the Nogales area. But this is the first time they've received a tip that specifically mentioned Nancy Guthrie.
Hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon. January 31st, 2026 began like any other quiet evening in Tucson, Arizona, before turning into a mystery that would soon grip the nation. Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old woman, shared dinner with family, was driven home, and walked through her front door in the Catalina foothills just before 10 p.m. By the next morning, she had vanished. The chilling scene left behind was heartbreakingly small, but impossible to ignore. Drops of blood on her porch and no sign of where she had gone. Long before her disappearance became a headline, Nancy was known simply as a devoted mother, grandmother, and woman of faith living a peaceful life in one of Tucson's most affluent and established neighborhoods beneath the Santa Catalina Mountains. She was also the mother of Savannah Guthrie, the longtime Today co-host. But in her daily life, Nancy kept things simple. She attended church, leaned on familiar routines, and stayed close to the people she loved. Because of her limited mobility and the daily medication she depended on, those routines mattered. She was not living the kind of life where she could suddenly leave on her own without notice. That ordinary family dinner at her daughter Annie's home now stands as the last known calm moment before everything changed. After the evening ended, Annie's husband drove Nancy back to her house and dropped her off shortly before 10 p.m. She went inside, and that was the last confirmed time anyone close to her saw her. The next morning, she was expected at a neighbor's home to watch an online church service, a quiet Sunday tradition that had become part of her regular week. When she never arrived, concern quickly turned into alarm. Family members were contacted, and someone went to check on Nancy's house. What they found immediately suggested something was terribly wrong. Nancy was missing, the home felt off, and there was blood on the front porch. A 911 call came in at around 12:08 p.m., and just 7 minutes later, Pima County Sheriff's deputies were on scene. The urgency of the response only deepened from there. Sheriff Chris Nanos came to the property himself, a move that signaled to both investigators and the media that this was no ordinary missing persons report. He later made it clear that Nancy's age and fragile physical condition made the situation deeply disturbing from the start. Then came the detail that sharpened the case even more. Her critical daily medication, which she could not safely miss, was still inside the house untouched. For investigators, that was a major turning point. Nancy had not simply wandered away. As Sheriff Nanos publicly stated, given her severely limited mobility, she could not have left on her own. Someone had taken her. Authorities moved fast, launching a large-scale search across the Catalina foothills. Helicopters combed the sky, infrared technology scanned the rugged landscape, and drones searched areas deputies could not easily reach on foot. Yet, despite the intensity of the effort, nothing surfaced. No trail, no vehicle, no confirmed witness, no sign of Nancy. The neighborhood looked as polished and undisturbed as ever, except for one home where an elderly woman had seemingly disappeared overnight. For the next 10 days, the public was given very little. No suspect had been identified, no vehicle description had been released, and no person of interest had been named. From the outside, the investigation appeared to be stalling, while pressure built from the media, the public, and a family living through every agonizing hour. In a case involving an 84-year-old woman with no access to her medication, those 10 days carried enormous weight. Then February 10th changed the entire narrative. The FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department released footage recovered from Nancy's Nest doorbell camera, not from the camera itself, but from residual data investigators managed to pull from back-end systems. That mattered because the device had been deliberately disabled. Whoever came to Nancy's house that night appeared to know exactly how to tamper with it and cut the feed. What they seemingly did not realize was that some of the footage had already been transmitted remotely and could still be recovered. The camera went dark at approximately 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, 2026. In the brief moments before that, the footage captured a figure approaching Nancy's front door in full concealment. The person wore a balaclava, gloves on both hands, and what appeared to be a holstered weapon. Over the shoulders was a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker backpack, a detail investigators considered especially important because Ozark Trail is a Walmart-exclusive brand, giving law enforcement a specific retail trail to explore. In the video, the figure walks toward the house, raises a gloved hand toward the camera lens, then steps away. Seconds later, the feed cuts out completely. The release of that footage sent shockwaves through the case. FBI Director Kash Patel personally posted it on social media, underlining just how seriously federal authorities were taking Nancy's disappearance. The FBI's Phoenix field office also released still images from the same recovered footage. Altogether, about 44 seconds were made public. From a forensic review, investigators built the first physical description of the suspect, a male of average build, believed to stand between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall. It was not much, but it was something tangible in a case that had offered very little. Evidence was also turning up beyond the camera footage. Search teams found a black glove about 1.5 miles from Nancy's home, and it appeared visually similar to the gloves worn by the person on camera. That glove was quickly submitted for DNA testing. In the days that followed, more gloves were recovered across the wider area and were also collected and processed. Then came another major forensic development. DNA gathered from Nancy's property did not belong to Nancy. It belonged to someone else. Investigators had confirmation that a second person had been at the home, and that DNA became a central part of the active case. At one point, a man was detained during a traffic stop in Rio Rico, Arizona, a community roughly 12 miles from the Mexican border. He was held overnight and questioned, only to be released the following morning. He later told reporters he was innocent, and investigators did not publicly identify him as a suspect. By then, the FBI had already received more than 13,000 tips from across the country, an astonishing number that showed just how widely this case had resonated. Retired Phoenix Homicide Sergeant Troy Hillman later described the recovered doorbell footage as a huge development for law enforcement. But he also cautioned that an important break in evidence is not the same as a solved case. That distinction would prove crucial, because even as investigators gained new clues, the case itself only seemed to grow more complicated. Another dramatic twist soon emerged, and this one had nothing to do with gloves, DNA, or surveillance footage. It involved money, specifically a ransom demand for $6 million in Bitcoin. Within days of Nancy's disappearance, ransom messages began reaching national media outlets, including TMZ. The demand was specific, the deadline was clear, and the communication included account information for payment. Publicly, there was no confirmed exchange between the family and whoever sent the demand before the deadline passed. Then, TMZ founder Harvey Levin revealed a development that immediately intensified interest in the ransom angle. He disclosed that a payment appeared to have been made to the same Bitcoin account referenced in the ransom communication. He did not say how much, citing the active investigation, but the fact that the account matched the one sent directly to the Guthrie family suggested this was not simply a random hoaxer tossing out a demand. Whoever sent the message seemed to possess case-specific information. A second ransom note followed with an even more striking claim. The sender said Nancy would be returned within 12 hours of receiving the full $6 million. Investigators reportedly worked backward from that statement. If it were true, and if Nancy was being held somewhere reachable within that window, it would place her within an estimated 700-mile radius of Tucson, a range covering several American states and stretching deep into Mexico. Still, not every message tied to the case proved credible. Authorities later arrested Derek Culla, a 42-year-old man from California, accusing him of sending a hoax ransom message directly to Nancy's oldest daughter, Annie, and her husband. Investigators traced the communication to a digital phone number linked to Culla's personal email address and IP address in California. When confronted, he admitted to sending the message. It was a troubling reminder that high-profile cases often attract people willing to exploit a family's trauma for attention or worse. Another message was sent to a local Tucson television station, though investigators could not publicly confirm whether it was connected to the Bitcoin ransom chain or was simply another separate attempt to insert confusion into the case. Then, in April 2026, yet another note surfaced, this time with a devastating claim. For the first time, the sender alleged that Nancy Guthrie was dead. The note also claimed she had been seen in Sonora, Mexico, and criticized the FBI for dismissing earlier communications as scams. TMZ later confirmed the sender had remained in repeated contact over several months, continuing to demand Bitcoin in exchange for information about Nancy's whereabouts. Former FBI agent Lena Coffender weighed in publicly, noting that Bitcoin is highly traceable, a detail that suggested investigators may already have been following the financial trail closely. The FBI also confirmed that it had been in active communication with Mexican authorities throughout the investigation. As the border increasingly became a focal point, the same haunting question lingered over every development. Were any of these messages real? And if even one of them was, what did it mean for Nancy? As officials pursued the digital and forensic leads, another search effort was unfolding in Mexico. A volunteer organization called Buscando Corazones, or Searching for Hearts, became involved. Based in the Nogales area, the group is known for difficult, methodical searches in remote parts of northern Mexico, often locating the remains of missing people when others cannot. Their work is physically punishing, emotionally devastating, and carried out with a seriousness born from experience. The group is led by Ramona Guadalupe Ayala Ortiz, who has years of experience in identifying clandestine graves by reading disturbed earth and other subtle indicators that the land has been altered by human activity. Her team regularly receives anonymous tips, and while many lead nowhere, each one is treated with care. Then one tip arrived that stood apart. An anonymous caller told Ramona that Nancy Guthrie's remains were buried near the Mariposa port of entry, one of the official border crossings between Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Mexico. Ramona later said she had not known about Nancy's case until the caller mentioned her by name. Once she learned more, she approached the information the same way she would any other case. The directions were specific but sparse. Search near the streams and look beneath a velvet tree. Her team knew what to watch for, including scorch marks, uneven ground, broken root systems, and soil patterns inconsistent with the surrounding terrain. The first search took place on May 16th alongside Mexican authorities. The team worked the area carefully and found nothing. A second search was conducted days later at the same location and again turned up no results. A third search near a nearby stream was being planned, and Ramona made it clear they were not giving up. Back in Tucson, a separate discovery briefly caused alarm when human bones were found near Nancy's home. That concern was quickly eased after officials confirmed the remains were not tied to a crime and were instead related to a prehistoric anthropological site. The Pima County Sheriff's Office said it was aware of the anonymous tip given to Buscando Corazones, though Mexican authorities had not directly contacted the department about those searches. The Sheriff's Office maintained that its own investigation remained active. By May 2026, 100 days had passed since Nancy was taken from her home in the Catalina foothills. There had been no arrest, no confirmed suspect, and no public breakthrough that could finally bring her family answers. The Pima County Sheriff's Department marked the milestone with a carefully worded statement saying that scientific evidence processing and digital media analysis were still ongoing. That was the latest update. Not a suspect, not a resolution, but confirmation that the work was continuing behind the scenes. Sheriff Chris Nanos went further, publicly saying that an arrest would be made at some point in the case. He offered no timetable and no details, but his confidence suggested investigators believed they were moving toward something, even if it had not yet reached the point of public disclosure. By then, the federal presence was massive. The FBI confirmed that 150 agents were assigned to Nancy Guthrie's case, a striking level of manpower for a missing persons investigation and a sign of just how seriously authorities were treating it. The reward money had also climbed dramatically. The FBI was offering up to $100,000 for information leading to Nancy's location or the arrest of those involved. A private donor added another $100,000, while the Guthrie family pledged $1 million for credible information that would lead directly to Nancy's return. Even with that enormous total on the table, no confirmed breakthrough had followed. On the forensic side, a significant development quietly emerged. Critical physical evidence had been sent to a specialized laboratory in South Florida for analysis. Officials did not reveal exactly what had been submitted, but the decision to send material out of state suggested investigators were relying on advanced capabilities beyond what local facilities could provide. In early April, Savannah Guthrie returned to the Today Show and spoke openly alongside Jenna Bush Hager about how hard the experience had been. She described the broadcast as an anchor in the middle of chaos, 2 hours of the day that gave her something steady to hold on to. Her colleagues rallied around her, but the pain of what her family was enduring clearly followed her well beyond the studio. Then came Mother's Day 2026, when Savannah shared a deeply emotional tribute online featuring home videos and family photos spanning years. In one clip, Nancy looks into the camera and says, "Miss you." Savannah's caption made the family's heartbreak unmistakably clear, saying they missed her with every breath. It was a glimpse into the private grief behind a case that had already become painfully public. News Nation later reported, through senior national correspondent Brian Enton, that Savannah had not hired private investigators, and that the family was placing its trust fully in law enforcement. Savannah, Annie, and their sibling had also issued public video appeals, asking anyone, anywhere in the world, to come forward if they knew something. Their message was simple and desperate. Even the smallest detail could matter. The case also began drawing exactly the kind of attention no family wants. YouTuber Alexander Zabel Jr., 54, was arrested outside Nancy's Tucson home after live streaming from the property following complaints from neighbors. During the arrest, a Pima County Sheriff's Sergeant was knocked to the ground. The incident underscored how easily a real tragedy can become spectacle in the social media age. TMZ later received yet another message, this time from a new individual who claimed to know the identity of Nancy's kidnapper and demanded $100,000 in cryptocurrency in exchange for the information. Nothing public came from the demand, but it added one more layer of confusion to a case already crowded with false leads, competing claims, and desperate hope. By June 2026, more than 4 months had passed since Nancy Guthrie walked into her home and disappeared. There was still no confirmed suspect, no arrest, no verified location, and no answer to the question that had driven this investigation from the beginning. Where was Nancy? Multiple investigative threads remained active. Forensic testing continued on the physical evidence. The gloves recovered in the search area were still under analysis. The unidentified DNA found at Nancy's property remained a key part of the case file. Investigators were still tracing the Bitcoin trail connected to the ransom messages. And in Mexico, search efforts had not been abandoned. Every one of those paths was still alive, yet none had delivered the breakthrough the family and the public had been waiting for. The biggest questions remained unanswered. Was this planned, and if so, for how long? How did the person responsible know Nancy's routine so well? How did they know exactly when she would be home alone after being dropped off that night? Did they know her son-in-law's timing? Was Nancy taken across the border? And if so, through which crossing and by whom? Who actually wrote the ransom notes, and were any of them genuine? If money was sent, Did it reach someone with real knowledge or the wrong person entirely? And most painfully of all, is Nancy Guthrie still alive? What is undeniable is the sheer scale of the response. 150 FBI agents assigned to a single missing persons investigation. More than 13,000 tips reviewed. Active coordination between American federal authorities and the Mexican government. Evidence sent to a specialized South Florida lab. A reward fund soaring past $1 million without yielding a confirmed arrest. This is not an ordinary case, and nothing about it has unfolded in an ordinary way. The details of the crime itself also suggest deliberate planning. Nancy was an 84-year-old woman with severely limited mobility. She was not someone who could easily be lured away or casually followed into danger. If she was taken, it had to happen directly at her home, and whoever did it appeared prepared. A mask, gloves, a weapon, a backpack, knowledge of the property, knowledge of how to disable a doorbell camera before the footage could be used. This did not look like chance. It looked targeted. Someone appears to have chosen Nancy Guthrie specifically. Someone knew where she lived, knew when she would return home, and knew how to move through that property without leaving an obvious trail. That level of preparation is exactly what has made the case so troubling for investigators and so difficult to solve. And behind every piece of evidence is the person at the heart of it all. Nancy Guthrie was more than a name in a national story. She was a mother who spent evenings with her children, a grandmother, a woman of faith, and a neighbor who watched church online on Sunday mornings. She left her medication sitting on the counter not because she forgot, but because she never got the chance to take it. Her final known moment was simple and ordinary. Saying goodnight to family and going inside her own home, Savannah Guthrie has said publicly that the pain never leaves her, not even for a moment. She carries it with her to work, back home, and through every hour in between. Still, she keeps going, and so does her family. They have refused to stop searching, stop asking, or stop hoping.